First of all, thank you everyone for being here today. And I know that we actually also have a lot of people that intend to watch this webinar recording afterwards. So thank you to all of you as well. The other thing I want to let everyone know is that this webinar is being recorded. And so afterwards, we'll be posting this online for you to review or to share it or look at it or whatever it is that if you have any further question. The other thing I want to mention as well is that in the chat, you can actually send some messages. I see that some people are sending messages right now. And so if you have any questions during the webinar itself, please feel free to send me a message there. And if I get a chance, I'll look at it and I'll try to cover it during this webinar. So this is your chance to ask questions. And so ensuring that we'll actually get back to you and be able to address your concerns or use cases, etc. So my name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluent. So I've been talking to thousands of customers over the past decade regarding Matrix, regarding prioritization, and so forth. So I've seen a lot of different use cases. I've seen a lot of different ways in which people approach Matrix. So in this webinar today, what I want to focus on is actually an introduction to Matrix itself, the software application, as well as the fundamental philosophy behind Matrix. So I'm hoping that when you walk out of today's webinar, you have a sense of what Matrix can do for you and what it cannot do for you. And then also, what are the sort of 20% of features inside Matrix that'll give you 80% of the impact. Again, it's meant to be an introductory webinar. We can always address much deeper details in other webinars and so forth. But if you have any questions whatsoever, please send me a message there. And then my contact information is also here, hi@affluence.com. So you can always shoot me a message and I'll try my best to get back to you. With that, we're going ahead and continue. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is that customers face very, very similar challenges. And the question I have for you is, are you always focused on work with the most impact? And so one thing that I've seen is that in an organization, whether you're large or small, team members often have trouble understanding what's priority right now. More so than ever before, we have more things to do than the resources to do them. And so if that's the case, you can only focus on a smaller portion of the tasks that you have. And so understanding that priority is actually extremely important. Secondly, as you have more and more responsibilities, it's very, very challenging to keep track on the status of work across all of those areas of responsibilities. And so how do you communicate to others that you're working on something that's really critical, or how do you understand from others whether or not they're working on the right things? And lastly, communication is getting more and more overwhelming. If you haven't seen it already, you're just probably getting messages from just this morning, messages from via chat, via text, via email, via whatever software that you're using. And so what we've done with all this software, unfortunately, is we've created a very stressful environment with too much context switching. And that's a challenge that's common across the entire spectrum of customers. So what is Matrix? Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software to help teams manage emails, conduct efficient meetings, and get real-time status update on critical projects and priorities. The goal of our software is to help tackle those problems that we just talked about. So how do we overcome the helping organizations and teams understand priorities? So we use what's called the 4-quadrant methodology, which I'll dig into a little bit further, as a way to actually ensure that you're communicating priorities very effectively across your team. Second of all, Matrix provides many other ways to look at the same data that you have, including our one-on-one view, our agenda, timeline, so then you understand what you need to work on at any point in time, whether it's time-based or whether it's for somebody such as your manager or your direct report or a coworker. And then finally, Matrix provides really deep integrations into software solutions that you already use. So in particular, we're probably the most integrated solution inside Microsoft Teams and Outlook for really effective email and task prioritization, which I'll go into today. So what makes Matrix different? First of all, we're the only solution that's Microsoft 365 security certified across web app, Outlook app, as well as Teams app. We actually have been leveraging AI as much as possible to help you achieve your goals. And I'll try to show you some of the capabilities that we have that actually could be very, very beneficial. And then we also have templates that would allow you to save a lot of effort as you use our system more and more. And then finally, Matrix is available as a SaaS, HIPAA compliant, as well as an Azure Government Cloud solution. And then for enterprise customers, private Azure deployments. I'm bringing all this up, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us in order to discuss any of these in more details. So going back to the philosophy behind Protomatrix, there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." The idea is very simple. What happens is, as I mentioned to you, this morning you probably got 20 emails, and those 20 emails probably pull you in a bunch of different directions. The question is, are any of those emails really that crucial? If you were thinking about your quarterly goals, your annual goals, and the things you're trying to do to actually be successful at your work, were those emails actually even relevant? And the answer is typically no. So what happens in our era of information overload is that we're getting all these pings left and right? And so you have meetings and so forth, and it's just so distracting. And so it's awesome that this quote remains relevant today. So if we were to think about then what is important to you, and then what is urgent to you, how do you actually pull that together into one coherent picture? So the way to look at it is the 4-quadrant methodology. So imagine this for a second. Take out a piece of paper at your desk. Take out a piece of paper and start writing down all the things that you're thinking about, or that you should be working on, or that you're working on, or that you owe somebody. Okay, so start writing that list down. And I guarantee you, if that list is 3 items, you don't need Matrix because you're good. You can just get it done. Bam, bam, bam. But if that list is now 10, 15 items, the question I have for you is, what do you work on first? What are the things that you have to drop? Do you start at the top or start at the bottom? And then, or randomly in the middle? Or if you have to add additional things to this list, do you add it at the top or do you add it at the bottom? And that's the hardest part in all of this, which is deciding what to work on at any point in time. And so now take that list that you've just created, and we're actually going to go and put it into this matrix. And the way the matrix works is the following. Take all the things you have. What are the things that are, let's just call them important, urgent, and put on the top left? That's what you got to do today, right now, right? Don't work on anything else unless those things are actually tackled. And then what are the things that are important and actually you should be planning for? And this is what you should be working on next. And that's the top right. And then what are the things you can delegate? What delegate means is that, can someone else do this job better than you? Because in reality, across an organization, sometimes you're taking on things just because you did, not because it's actually the right thing for you to do. And especially if you're a manager, you should not be spending time doing some of the nitty-gritty stuff when your direct reports might be actually much better at accomplishing it. So then where your time should be spent is deciding what needs to be worked on, as opposed to working on the things themselves. And then finally, the inbox is sort of everything else. So if you were to look at this matrix, and if you look at your list today, and if everything is in the top left quadrant, then you've done something wrong as well. Because if everything is important and urgent, then nothing is important and urgent. And if that's empty, that's actually a good approach. In fact, if you were doing this really well, you're actually planning for things ahead of time instead of fighting fires, right? So a lot of your action plan and a lot of your goals should be to actually be working on the things in the plan quadrant instead. So think about that as you're looking at this. So now that you've done this matrix, imagine if you're walking around the office and you're comparing notes with your managers, and you're comparing notes with your colleagues, and you're comparing notes with your direct reports. Do you see alignment? And that's the key. So Matrix is a communication tool, and what it communicates is your priority. And so what you're looking then is, you're going to look at everyone else's priorities and see if it matches. And one thing that's really interesting is, this is the hardest part about using Matrix. So I'm not going to lie. If you're not able to make these priorities, you're going to struggle with Matrix, and you're going to struggle with every project management software. And so that's where the bulk of your time is deciding what to work on. So Matrix helps make that easy. Now, the interesting thing that's not so obvious is that success from using Matrix isn't about finding what everyone agrees on. It's discovering disagreement on what should be priority when it isn't. So when you talk to your manager and suddenly you and your manager discover that something you thought was very important is actually not, and then vice versa, something that you didn't think was important is actually very important, then we have given you value as a software. So keep that in the back of your mind. It is not an obvious thing to to recognize. But if you ever find that you're saving time because you stop work on something, and if you are working on, you actually pick up something that you didn't realize was important, let us know, because that means our software is added value, because I'd love to hear stories around that. So now we're actually going to jump into the webinar. I'm sorry, the demo itself in this webinar. The other thing I do want to mention is that if you haven't already, get started at Matrix, you can go to affluence.com and then click on the web app or sign in. You can actually get started. And then the second is that these webinars are recorded, and so you can access them at affluence.com/webinars, and then our contact support at affluence.com. If you have any questions whatsoever, make sure you send us a message there. Now I'm going to jump to the demo. I do want to mention again that in the chat section, if there's any questions that you have, send me a message in there, and I'll try to take a look and make sure I cover them. So with that, I'm going to jump to the product. Okay, so as you can see here, what I have is that digital version of that 4-quadrant that I talked about. You can see I have what's called a project open in Matrix. There's the do now, do later, delegate, and inbox. So it is very, very visual. So here I have a project called My Team Priorities. And then when I have something to do, I can actually create a task very, very easily. So imagine if I want to go and I want to follow up with webinar participants. Okay, so that's a task that I have to do. But instead of actually just typing out the task, I'm going to say due in 1 week. And that's how I create a task in Matrix. One of the things that Matrix tries to do is actually understand the language that you type into it. So follow webinar participants due in 1 week. Now you see how actually our system will set the due date for you. Now it will show up in your calendar and it ensures that you actually get it done. And as you can see, within the quadrants themselves, these are the tasks. And actually, I can go and I can drag and drop as needed. Imagine this is actually very important and urgent. I can actually go ahead and drag this to the side. And if you were to look at this matrix, you can see what my priorities are. And then if I were to go and actually share this with my teammates and my coworker, they can also see what my priorities are as well. When you select a task, on the right-hand side, this is what we call the item details. So this is the details around the task themselves. And so you have the name of the task, you have the owner is who's responsible. The idea around Party Matrix is that there's always responsibility. There's one person who's responsible for anything that you have to do. And you might have additional followers, but responsible party is the person who actually needs to mark the task as done. And then afterwards, you have progress, 0 to 100%. Effort, how much time it actually takes to get it done, because not all tasks are created equal. And then finally, you have due dates. And so again, let me say, again, something might be due in 1 week, but then there's reminders, and that's different from due dates. An example I always give is taxes, because taxes always really takes a lot of work to do, right? So you might have taxes due on April 15th, but then you actually want to make sure that you set reminders 3 weeks prior to actually get started on it. Because if you wait until the day it's due, it's actually far too late. So that's just something to keep in mind. So as you think about, prioritization, as you think about managing your task, there's always that second dimension of time, of when. And so I highly recommend that if you use Party Matrix, make sure you set due dates, make sure you set reminders, because that's actually a very, very helpful way to track everything you have to do. And then down further, there's a chat section, which essentially you can think of as an audit trail related to this particular task. It's the context of this conversation. And so if you were to assign this to somebody, it actually allow you and that person to have that conversation directly here about that task. And then you have the note section. And so the note section is where you can add additional information around the task itself, but you can also look at it as a way to add subtasks. So subtask 1, subtask 2, subtask 3, okay? And then as I mark the subtask as done, progress is updated for me. And then finally, you have resources where you may add additional files and links and so forth. So that itself in a nutshell is what an item detail is. So let me explain to you how and why you should use some of these components. First of all, just remember that Party Matrix is a prioritization software. So what that means is that you should put tasks in here that actually matter. And so I recommend a couple of things. One, you should always have a team priority project. And within that team priority project, you can open what's called the project details. And in this project details, you can decide who should be in this project. And that could be your coworker, that could be your teammate, that could be your direct report, that could be your manager. The idea is that when they open Matrix, they see the exact same thing as you do. And then you can talk about your priorities when you're having your meeting, and you can project this onto your screen when you're in that conference room together. And it creates so much alignment so quickly because you can skip over the things that you all agree on, right? Again, as I mentioned earlier, the key is to look at the things that you see discrepancy as opposed to the tasks that you all agree on. And so when you use Matrix, that's one of the things I recommend, to have that team priorities. The second is to have your own personal priority project. And so inside your personal priority matrix project for your personal task, that's when you can have everything else that you want to do. And that is more aligned with your own personal goals. When you click on this view here, we open what's called the project details. So the project details is essentially the project information itself, the people who are involved in this project, and then the quadrant names itself. One of the things that we allow you to do is actually the ability to customize these quadrant names. So I showed you the do now, do later, delegate, and inbox as a potential quadrant name. But one of the things you'll learn as you use Matrix is maybe some of these terminology fit you better. For example, we defaulted the quadrant 4 to inbox because it doesn't make any sense to track tasks that are not important and not urgent. But we call it inbox, but maybe your philosophy is a little bit different. And so that allows you to customize both the project as well as the name. So let me show you now how to create a personal project from scratch. So you simply go to the project list here, and then you can choose create project. And so when you go and create project, you see that actually I have a blank project I can choose from. But the other thing we have as well is actually we have some public templates that you can use. And so over the years, we build out some best practices. And so we've created some sample matrix for you. And so from this here, you can actually choose an existing template. But I'm going to go ahead and choose a blank one. And so my personal priorities, okay, so I create that project, very, very simple name, and I can choose a standard color that I want to go with. So go ahead and choose that and add project. And so now you can see that I've created the project and I have the 4 quadrant. And again, I can really quickly track my task. So if you were using Matrix, go ahead and create this because it helps you understand what it is that you need to work on. This is the hardest part. You need to prioritize. You need to put the task into the appropriate quadrants. Now, once you have a lot of tasks that's added to Matrix, you might want to look at it from a different view. So I'll go back to this team priority project here. So I have a couple of tasks here. And if you go up here, we actually have several different views for you to see that information that you have. So this is the matrix view. This is the list view. The list view is actually very helpful to see what are the items that are overdue. When you have tasks that are overdue, it actually turns red here. So it's very, very visual, and you can see that. And it shows everything you have across your entire matrix here. And then you have the calendar view. The calendar view takes all these tasks again and actually display in calendar form, and you can drag and drop to reprioritize or change a due date rather directly from this, and you can open the task as needed. Now, people work differently. That's one of the things that I've learned over time as well, is not everyone want to think in the matrix style. And so therefore, that's why some of these other views exist, because you may work with multiple team members and some of them are more accustomed to, the list view, which is more like the Excel style view, which makes perfect sense. And then of course we have the Gantt chart view as well. So the way Matrix works is if you think of all these views, what's happening is that we're taking the data that you have and we're just displaying it in a way that makes sense to you. So if you were to use Matrix for project management, you can actually create dependencies and have a Gantt chart that's actually built automatically for you. I see that there's actually questions that's coming into the chat. This is fantastic. I'll try to make sure that I address some of these here. And I can see that someone hears things that I speak quite fast, which my apologies. So hopefully you can watch the video afterwards if there's anything that's missing. Okay, so let me go back to this matrix view now. Now, one of the things that we talked about is actually where task may come from. We talk, for example, you saw how I can add a task real quickly, but for me, actually personally, I get a lot of messages via email. Customers send me a request or anything along those lines. So this is how it works inside Matrix. So if you go to Matrix, you can actually open your Outlook, and then from here, you can actually go to this icon and install the Matrix application. Once you install Matrix, you can go and actually capture any email that you get and convert into a task. One of the challenges I've seen over and over again is that, we get a ton of emails, right? And then some of those emails actually require us to take actions. So how do you decide when to take actions on that emails? Do you flag it, right? Or do you set a reminder on it? But then if you have, 50 emails and then you're flagging dozens of them, how do you know which one to get to? So one of the things we've added with Matrix is the ability for you to prioritize an email and making sure that you can set a due date on the email, set a reminder in the email, and assign to the appropriate folks. So I have an example here. So for example, let's say I have an email here, okay? One of the things I can do is I can open Matrix. And so now that I've installed the Outlook integrations, I can open Matrix. And actually, you can see how when I hover this, I have the option to prioritize email. So I'm going to click on that. So what this does is it takes this email and actually converts it into a task. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that project that we created earlier. I'm going to choose quadrant 4 here. That's just what it defaults to. I can choose another quadrant. Actually, I'll choose this quadrant. And then actually, I can even assign it to somebody directly from my Outlook integration. So imagine the use case that this is an email from an external client who's very important, and you want to make sure that the appropriate team member is reviewing this email. If you forwarded this email to them, the problem is you're creating another email. And then not only that, they don't know how important this email is. Also, they don't have it tracked within the appropriate context, right? Which is maybe you can even have, imagine you could have attached this to a project that's named for your client, your customer that you're working with. So it's very, very contextual, and it helps you stay focused on whatever it is that this email is pertinent to. So you can see how I can actually do that, and I can go ahead and assign a due date, and then I create that task, and that's it. That's how I would create that task. And so then Matrix, you can see this is the item detail view that shows up on this side. After you create a task using Matrix Outlook extension, this little tag Matrix shows up as well. So now you know that you've prioritized these emails. The neat thing is, if I go back to here, you see how that task has been created, and actually the email itself is uploaded. So this is a very, very helpful way to prioritize an email, and then you can add additional resources as needed. One of the neat thing about Matrix is that you can actually do this in so many different other ways as well, which means what I mean by that is Matrix has a special email address for every single one of your quadrants. So that allows you to forward an email into Matrix and keep track in one central place. So now you have both your emails as well as your priorities accessible within Matrix. With that, I'm actually going to jump over to Microsoft Teams. The reason I jumped Microsoft Teams is this is where we are finding more and more customers spending their time. Of course, this webinar right here is on Microsoft Teams. But what happens is that inside Microsoft Teams, if you're spending time chatting with your team members, and then if you're spending time communicating with team members there, what we want to do is we want to bring Matrix to you. So if you go to Microsoft Teams, go ahead and go to the App Store, install Matrix, and when you do, you have this view right here, okay? And with this view, you can go ahead and pin it. And so if you pin it, you can actually access your entire Matrix inside Microsoft Teams. Everything that you saw, actually my team priorities, you see all the information is synced. And so if you use Microsoft Teams on the iPhone or on the mobile device as well, that information is also available to you instantly. So Matrix is there, and it helps you see your priorities regardless of what platform you're on. But there's a couple of neat things that I think is actually really cool about how we add value to your Microsoft Teams interactions. So let's just say if I go to a chat with a team member, okay, I'm going to go to a chat here with a team member. And let's say my manager send me an email that says, could you send me a report? If you just hover over this chat right here and you click on this ellipsis, you can actually create a PM item directly. One of the use cases I've seen is that, you're in a meeting with somebody or you're in a conversation with somebody and you talk about all these cool things that you're going to do, productive things that will actually, make meaningful impact. And then 2 weeks later, when you are actually reconvening to review the things that you've done, you ask, hey, did you get that task done? And then the other person will say, oh, I forgot to write it down. So with Party Matrix, you sort of take away that excuse because you can actually make it so simple. When you are chatting about something inside Teams, you can create that task directly. The second thing that actually is also very helpful is when you need to understand what it is you need to do for your manager. So we have something called the one-on-one view. So if you go to this plus icon here, you can add Party Matrix. You can add Party Matrix, and then when you do, you can create a tab. And there's two types of tabs. There's a one-on-one view, and there's a full project view. The full project view allows you to embed a Party Matrix inside the conversation you have with your teammates. But the one-on-one view is actually something that we call, the way I look at it is it flips all this project management software around into a people-centric view. And so when you open the one-on-one, I have an example here, right? When I open this one-on-one with Eugenia, what I see is all the tasks I have with her across all of my Party Matrix. And this is so helpful when you are working with your manager and you're working on so many different areas of responsibilities, so many different tasks, so many different projects, and then you're trying to brainstorm what are the things that I should be working on or what's the status of my task. When you open the one-on-one view, it shows you all of that in one central place. You can see that it shows it in the list view here, and you can see that there's a lot of items that are overdue. I can sort it extremely easily, and if we can go through this list and you can have a very, very productive conversation without having to switch context, without having to switch over to Party Matrix, without having to go and open every single project. And this is something that happens with so many software that you're probably using today. If you use even, really good Microsoft products or other third-party software, how often do you find yourself having to open that software, jumping, switching context, searching through all of it to find out one thing, and then having to redo all of that to find out the next thing? So Party Matrix has this one central place, which look at all of it from a people-centric point of view. This could be your manager. This could be a colleague that you're working with. This could be another person at your company that you don't often work with, but sometimes you actually have some shared tasks in common. So Party Matrix facilitates this whole process across your entire Party Matrix data set. And then the second thing is, as you're having a conversation with your manager, you can actually add the task directly from here. So this is so helpful because, again, I'll do an example here, call Sue tomorrow. And so I can go and I create that task. I can add it to a specific project. And then when I do, it actually assigns it to my teammate directly, and then it adds me as a follower. So when this action is actually done, I get an update on it. And that really helps me easily create priorities and tasks, and then at the same time get updated on that progress. Okay, so that is how I created a task. By the way, one of the things that you notice here too is that the way that our system works is that it actually adds some intelligence to this. So I had created this task, but it actually found several duplicate tasks for me inside Party Matrix and alerts me to it. And so what that means is that when you're using Party Matrix, as you add more and more tasks, some of these tasks might be duplicate. And so we try to surface that up for you as well. Because actually for my own personal, Party Matrix, I have something like 300 plus projects. And so I'm tracking so many different tasks. And actually, I have zero problem understanding what I need to work on because of the way the system is organized. So going back to Party Matrix, there's a couple things I want to highlight again. So you see how I have projects on the left-hand side here, and the project shows me these are all the different areas of responsibilities that I have. So examples of good projects are: 1, team priorities; 2, your overarching goals; 3, it could be a specific project you're actually working on. And so that could be, if you're a consulting firm, that could be a client. So you would have a bunch of different projects for different clients. It could be that you might have a project for, if you're a real estate company, maybe different properties that you work on. So you would create a different project for each of those properties. if you were a Salesforce or a marketing company, what you might want to go and actually track a client that you work with at any point in time. So again, each of those is a different project. So what's really neat then is that everyone who's working on those projects can go to one central place and see those priorities together. And again, you can talk about it and you can actually identify the gaps within the work that you have. You see, actually, I also have a couple projects that are starred. And the way starring works is when you star a project, it actually surfaces up and actually makes it easier to find the project that you work with. Because maybe you have a lot of different projects, but only a few that actually truly matters. So if you were to click on the project details here, you can star that, and then you can see that when you have a task itself, you can also star the task. So that's a really good feature to use. I'm going to pause for 1 second because I want to emphasize that if all you did was create those few matrices that I mentioned, and then if you were to use the add item task to add the task and set the due dates and so forth, you've captured 80% of the value in Proto Matrix. That's sort of my word of advice, which is that's if you don't want to get overwhelmed with any project management software, those are the capabilities inside Protomatrix that I think is most helpful today. Okay, so get started with that using Protomatrix. So now I'm going to dig into some additional capabilities that I think will could fundamentally change the way you work. The first is actually the Protomatrix goal system. So here's how it works. So if you go to our item onboarding page, right, what happens is you can input a goal into Protomatrix and we can help you achieve that goal. So let me come up with an example here, which is how to get more webinar attendees. Okay, so I'm doing this live in this particular demo here. So you can think about, if you were to pause for a second, think about a goal that you have. It could be how to increase sales. It could be how to become more effective, how to improve your supply chain, etc. So, but because it's a webinar, I'll say how to get more webinar attendees. And so I'm going to build my action plan. So what I've just done is I've leveraged the Matrix AI system to turn my goal into task. And what I also did was I ran this, and it takes a few minutes to actually generate this. So what I've done is actually I generate a project for us already. And in this particular project, I type in the prompt, how to get a promotion to senior project manager and also get a raise. And so this is what Matrix has just generated for you. And so we actually have a matrix, and you can see actually a couple of things. One, the quadrant name is different: low effort, high impact, high effort, high impact, low effort, low impact, and high effort, low impact. So this is an impact effort matrix. And so you can see that the dimension here is actually different from the standard Eisenhower matrix that I have. And our system has actually generated a series of different tasks for you as a starting point to help you become more productive at achieving those goals. And so that's actually what's generated. And so you can go through each of these as a starting point and go down the list and see if it helps you meet those goals. And so think about your goals. Think about, what are the things that you really wish to accomplish? And you can actually do this with Party Matrix today. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and send you a link to this inside the chat. So I'm going to do that live right there. And then each of you can actually go to that page and just type in your goal. And then it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, something for this quarter or something that's more a lifelong goal, and see what Party Matrix can suggest for you. And because you saw how I typed the webinar attendee, improve webinar attendees. The project has been generated for me, and I can go here and I can look at this as a starting point for some of my ideas. So that's something that I think is actually really helpful as a way to get started with Matrix really quickly. And it's one of the new things that we're doing at Affluence in order to improve your experience. And so I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to get your feedback there. If there's anything that makes sense in terms of how we can improve the entire process for you. And so with that, I'm actually going to pause and let's review some of the questions that were sent in. And so if you have any questions right now around Matrix, around the basic capabilities of Matrix, go ahead and send in the chat, and I'll take a look and see if I can answer those. Okay. So there's a question around email integrations with Matrix itself. So as I mentioned earlier, you can install that Outlook app, but I also mentioned that every project actually has a unique email address. So if you were to go to project details, you can actually click on this, and then you can actually get secret email address. So the way it works is actually really cool. Imagine if you work with different clients, as I mentioned earlier, and you create a project for every client, right? You can go and you can copy the secret email address for each of those clients. And inside your Outlook, you can create a rule where all the emails from those clients get forwarded into Matrix. And so now client A, all emails from client A will go into Matrix quadrant 4 for project A, and so on and so on. It's a really, really useful way to keep your emails organized. So for example, I have a project where all my emails from Microsoft actually goes into that project automatically. So I get a ping inside my Matrix when I have that. Really, really helpful way to keep those organized and ensure that everyone else actually is on the same page. One thing that you'll see with Matrix is it actually helps the entire organization be aligned on priorities. So when I mentioned how Matrix is a communication tool, what it is doing is it's creating alignment because it forces you to do that prioritization, right? Similarly, what happens is if someone leaves the organization, or if someone's on maternity leave or paternity leave or is sick, what if you need to understand what their priorities are? And you can't call them. Maybe they're not accessible. But with Matrix, you can see all that information in one central place. So going back to the email, what happens is if you have a team member who actually set this up, and so all emails from a certain client gets forwarded into Matrix, when that person is on leave, it actually still gets sent into Matrix. And so now you can still ensure that you can see the emails from the relevant customer. And so that's some advanced use cases of Matrix that actually creates alignment. And so again, every quadrant inside Matrix has an email address, and you can also make sure that when you do that email address, you can actually assign it to somebody as well. And then the other thing is this capability works with any email client. Doesn't have not just Outlook. You can set it in Gmail. You can do link forwarding in email forwarding in Gmail, and it allows you to set this up as well. All right. The other question, turn an email into an action. So I believe I showed you that with Outlook, but I'll show you here as well, the secret email inbox here, and you can see that I can choose the owner name as well as the quadrant directly from here with this special email address. All right, are there any other questions? Anything that you want me to address in more details? Helen, thank you for your feedback there. If there's any additional feedback, if you want to just send a single email into Matrix, the best thing to do is to use that the Matrix app add-in right here inside Outlook, because you can take any email and convert that into a task. So I covered the email integrations with Outlook, but you can go ahead and review this video if there's any other questions you have. But it's very, very simple and straightforward to prioritize an email. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into the presentation here real quick then. So as mentioned, this webinar was meant to be introductory. And I think that it is now on you to see whether or not Matrix is a fit for you. And it's not a fit for everybody, because not everyone can actually go and approach the software and be able to, use it in the 4 quadrants, because it does require a very, very structured approach. And we totally understand that. And the software is not designed for everybody for that reason. But for those who actually go and do those things that I said, which is 1, create those projects, right? A personal priority project, a shared team priority project, and a key initiative project. And then when you're in there, invite the appropriate team members and pitch to them on why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. And then finally, creating items inside Matrix, and make sure that you do the due date, and make sure that you put it in the appropriate quadrants, and then make sure that you set reminders. And then when you're done with those tasks, mark them as done. If you do those things, you will definitely get value out of Party Matrix. And if that's the only thing you do without using any of the other advanced capabilities that I showed you, I think you're going to see a lot more uh, peace of mind, because when you have those tasks written down as priorities, it's out of your head. And that will actually make you feel better every single day. So when you wake up in the morning, you know what it is you need to focus on. And so what success with Party Matrix looks like is that after you use Party Matrix the way that I've mentioned here, you now have one central place to track all your priorities. And so if you have something you need to do or something you want your team members to do, you don't have to go and send another email. You don't have to go and create a chat. You don't have to send a text. You don't have to have a meeting. Instead, you're creating those tasks within the different matrices, and you have all the context that's needed. And then not only that, as I mentioned earlier, everyone's able to see and understand what their individual priorities are. And then when you find the things that are misaligned, you have a conversation about it right away. That's the key. Don't let it linger. If you are in disagreement, you're using Party Matrix correctly. I didn't get to show you the template system of Party Matrix, but actually the template system of Party Matrix is very, very easy. It's in the project details view, and you can actually go there and convert everything that you have into a template. And so anytime that you have a repetitive process, Party Matrix automatically propagate that for you. But at the same time, you can use the onboarding link that I sent as a way to onboard employees or to improve your processes, right? Leverage our AI as much as possible and see what we can do for you, and then provide us feedback on what works well, what doesn't. But then you can actually turn those into templates across your whole organization, and that will allow you to become more efficient and more effective instantly. And then lastly, if you're using Party Matrix correctly and you're using our add-ins and so forth, your important emails are prioritized, they're not forgotten. And so if you're flagging emails still and you're finding that you're not answering all your emails, then it's time for a change. And that change is to make sure that you use the Party Matrix add-in to prioritize those emails and assign to the appropriate people. And that's it. That's it for today's webinar. I do want to thank all of you that were here today. And I want to make sure that, if there's any questions that you have, make sure that you reach out to me. Again, hi@affluence.com or support@affluence.com. This webinar was recorded, and so, we'll send this out. Thank you very much for all the positive feedback in the chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you all.